On September 7th, 2011, you savagely beat your child to the edge of death.
He's standing over Robert for about 3-4 seconds, and that's when 2 shots went off. And Robert didn't move at all.
By assault, I punched her. I have put a bag over her head till she lost consciousness.
These are some of the faces of the most notorious and dangerous women who ended up in prison. Let's go to the courtroom to see how these women reacted to their sentences. This case has one of the most dangerous black women you may ever hear of because she intentionally murdered 2 of her children, and she was without remorse all through her trial in court. Let's take a seat at the Wayne County Court to see how it went down. Mitchell Blair stood remorseless and adamant beside her lawyer as she requested a life sentence without parole from the judge in the Wayne County courtroom. After everything, Mitchell pleads guilty to all the charges alleged against her.
Now, the information I have before me is that you want to plead guilty to count 2, the premeditated murder of Stoney Blair.
Yes.
And count 3, the felony murder of Stephen Berry.
Yes.
Okay. Am I correct that you want to plead guilty to those counts?
Yes.
Michelle Blair's horrific story began in August 2012 when she came back home to find her youngest son, Matthew, stimulating himself with a doll. When she asked why he was engaging in such a gross act, he confessed that his older brother Stephen had been sexually abusing him. Being a victim of sexual assault herself, Mitchell was enraged and immediately called in Stephen for questioning. While interrogating him, she lost her cool and beat him to death. To make his punishment worse, she poured hot water on his private organs. Once she confirmed he was dead, she packed his body and stuffed it in her deep freezer. 9 months later, Mitchell discovered that her older daughter, Stoney, was also abusing Matthew. So, she gave her the same treatment she gave Stephen, but in a different way. Michelle beat and starved Stoney until she died. Then, this remorseless mum of 4 stuffed Stoney's body inside the same freezer where she had put Stephen's dead body 9 months earlier.
I punched her. I have put a bag over her head till she lost consciousness. I threw hot water on her, scalding hot water from the faucet.
Did you hit her in the head with the...
Yes, I hit her head multiple times, over and over.
These were all done in May 2013. However, authorities only found out when Mitchell was evicted from her home because she couldn't pay her rent in 2015. Perhaps the most worrying thing about Mitchell Blair is the nonchalant attitude and the lack of remorse she showed while sharing her own account of why she murdered her kids. During the court proceeding, she blamed the fathers of the children for not showing up and insisted that killing them was the right thing to do.
And they want to talk about how they love my daughters. Now they want to be front and center, but they was always in the background. They never did anything for them, never showed up to my door, not once.
She was eventually sentenced by Judge Dana Hathaway to life in prison without the possibility of parole. If you think the case of Mitchell Blair was shocking, wait until you see the case of Shelby Isaac, who reacted in a jarring manner after hearing her sentence. Let's take a seat at the Shelby County Court to see how the trial unfolded. The weight of the sentence delivered by Judge James Lammy was too much for Shelby Isaac to handle because as soon as she heard she was declared guilty, she passed out and fell to the floor. A lady who appears to be Shelby's attorney was seen patting her back in a bid to calm her down, but as soon as she heard the first judgment, the convict sobbed and collapsed in grief. In the background, a woman believed to be Shelby's mum could be heard wailing. The judge didn't seem bothered by her antics as he continued with his speech, eventually sentencing her to 30 years in prison. He even went ahead to chew gum after reading his sentence, clearly unbothered by their wailing. As Shelby wept and slumped to the floor, he continued reading the sentence, showing very little emotion and concern for the ongoing drama in the courtroom, even as court workers tried to stabilize her before taking her to the hospital. Anyone watching this very emotional court session would have felt pity for Shelby Isaac. However, the gravity of her crime suggests that she deserves the 30-year sentence she got, and maybe even more. It all started in January 2016 when Shelby shot the co-owner of a local hair business, Eddie Tate Jr., and his pregnant girlfriend, Edwina Thomas, as reported by the news.
The woman police say shot and killed a man and his pregnant girlfriend is behind bars. Shelby Isaac is now charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of Eddie Tate and Edwina Thomas. She is also charged with the death of Thomas's unborn child.
The then 18-year-old was a regular patronizer of the business. However, the business relationship reportedly broke down on the 22nd of January 2016 when she tried to get a refund for the hair extension she had bought earlier. Another source claimed that she had actually tried to steal the hair weaves from the store. In the end, prosecutors confirmed that she shot both Eddie and his girlfriend in the 2100 block of Westchester Circle. Eddie died at the scene, but Edwina was rushed to the hospital when she eventually gave up the ghost. A co-defendant, Victoria Say, was also questioned during the investigation after it was revealed that she gave Shelby Isaac a lift while she was escaping the scene. Following the incident, Shelby was charged and convicted for the first-degree murder of Eddie and reckless homicide of an unborn baby. Shelby's case was jarring, but the crime involved in this next case will leave you devastated. In this case, the defendant assaulted her child physically and was arrested and sentenced for her crimes. Elizabeth Escalona kicked her 2-year-old baby, named Jocelyn Cedillo, in the abdomen because she soiled her pants. She didn't stop there. She also hit her with a milk jug and glued her hand to the wall. The notorious child abuser looked emotionless as a bailiff officer marched her to a designated seat in the courtroom. But it was only a matter of time before her straight face took a different look. Elizabeth cried uncontrollably as she was confronted with pictures of the bruises she inflicted on Jocelyn. During the court proceeding, Elizabeth was quite critical of her actions and even labeled herself a monster. "I hit her, I kicked her constantly, and she didn't deserve that," said Escalona. "Only a monster does that." Addressing Escalona in court, the Dallas County judge, Judge Larry Mitchell, clearly trying to maintain his composure to hide his rage, described the brutality Escalona showed towards her child.
On September 7th, 2011, you savagely beat your child to the edge of death.
According to medical reports, this assault caused Jocelyn significant brain trauma and several physical injuries. The child, Jocelyn, fortunately recovered from her injuries after being hospitalized for days. Reacting to these revelations, Elizabeth said, "I have no comment, and only God can judge me. That's all I gotta say." She asked for a second chance to rehabilitate herself and seek therapy. The judge didn't grant her wish, but sentenced her to 99 years in prison.
I find you guilty of the offense charged. I'll set your sentence at confinement in the penitentiary for a period of 99 years.
The previous case involved a crime of a mother on her child, but this next case was a mother reacting surprisingly at the sentencing of her child. Andrea Cook did not cry, and her mother didn't wail in the courtroom this time when Cook was sentenced to 11 years in prison in a pair of carjacking cases. This was after she was initially sentenced to 20 years in prison, but got a plea deal.
18-year-old Daytona Beach High School student who was sentenced to 20 years in prison for carjacking and battery has been allowed to withdraw her plea. The sentence was also thrown out. Keandra Cook pled no contest in June, but as West 2's Claire Metz reports, now a judge has agreed there was miscommunication between Cook and her former attorney.
There was no need for bailiffs to drag her again from the courtroom, unlike during her previous sentencing when her previous defense attorney had assured her she would not be going to prison, only to hear Circuit Judge Matt Foxman sentence her to 20 years behind bars, and she and her mother wailed very loudly. Besides the 11 years, Foxman ordered Cook to serve 20 years probation, which will run concurrent with her prison term, so she'll be serving probation even while locked up. Cook stood in an orange jail jumpsuit before the judge on Monday. When the judge asked her if she wanted to say something, she seemed to hesitate and remained silent for a few seconds before looking up at her attorney, Stephen Robinson. He leaned over and talked to her, placing an arm on her back. Then she spoke in a soft voice.
You get to say the final words.
I just want to say that I'm sorry to the people wrong that her son had to get shot.
Cook told the judge she wants to straighten out her life. Foxman gave her some words of encouragement.
You got good in you, and I think you got potential. Don't lose sight of that.
He added that he had been concerned previously that she did not appreciate the seriousness of the crimes in which a Palm Coast man was shot when police said Cook and her then boyfriend, Kendrick Bass, tried to carjack them after she lured the victim and a friend to South Daytona using a dating app. Bass is accused of shooting the man. Like at the first sentencing, Cook again entered a no-contest plea to principal to carjacking with a deadly weapon, principal to attempted carjacking with a deadly weapon, and principal to aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. Foxman adjudicated her guilty. This was to the dismay of Cook's family because they expected a much lighter sentence.
We believed, we were sure that she was coming home, that She was looking at community control and house arrest.
Sentencing guidelines recommended Cook receive a minimum 10.5 years in prison. The judge could have given her life in prison without the agreement in place between the prosecutor and defense attorney. Now Foxman's choices were limited. He could reject the agreement, but he could not change its terms. As part of the agreement, Cook agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in their case against Bass, who was later arrested and faced his own charges. She also agreed to share responsibility, along with her accomplice, for the restitution. If the previous case didn't move you, this next case will move you. In this case, the two women who were sentenced for murder clearly could not handle the consequences of their actions and displayed drama after they heard their sentencing. Let's take a seat at the Charleston County courtroom to see how this drama unfolded. Two women, Erica and Shanita from South Carolina, wailed loudly and could not be consoled as they slumped to the ground after they heard the judgment. Erica's mum was also visibly traumatized by the judgment. She screamed at her daughter to get up and wept uncontrollably, prompting court staff to bundle her out of the courtroom. The two women were charged with homicide by child abuse after prosecutors said they whipped Richardson with a belt in November 2009 for urinating on the floor. In 2009, 3-year-old Serenity Richardson visited the home of the lesbian couple, where she was supposed to stay for at least 2 weeks. As Serenity's godmother, Erica was a close member of the Richardson family. She was present at the hospital when the toddler was born. However, she didn't seem to care too much about these connections when she and her lover beat Serenity to death with a belt and plastic coat hangers simply because she had a potty accident. The judge was dismayed at their claim that they did not know their actions would lead to the death of Serenity.
The severity of the blow to that child's leg, and to say that you did not recognize what had been done, to ignore what must have been the excruciating sounds that came from that child on a daily basis.
EMTs found Richardson unresponsive at a house in the Lakes of Somerville subdivision and took her to Somerville Medical Center, where she was pronounced dead. Medical staffers saw bruises and cuts all over the child's chest, stomach, legs, arms, feet, back, and head. Erica's mum had to be bundled out of the courtroom after she kept screaming, crying, and refusing to leave the courtroom. Erica told the court that she was responsible for some things, but she wasn't responsible for the toddler's death. Meanwhile, Shanita's attorney submitted a similar argument, claiming that Erica was an aggressive partner who demanded control. Judge Deidre Richardson was in no mood to entertain their shameless blame trade. Attorneys said Butts had been caring for Richardson for about a month and was a friend of Richardson's mother. "All I ask is that justice be served for her today," Richardson's mother told the judge on Thursday, "that she finally can seriously rest in peace, and then maybe, just maybe, I can breathe a breath of fresh air." Cunningham pleaded guilty to the charge. Butts entered an Alford plea, meaning she does not admit guilt, but does acknowledge that a trial would likely end in a guilty verdict. They were eventually sentenced to life in prison, which triggered their overdramatic response. It seems mothers usually attend the court trials of their daughters, as seen in the last two previous cases, and this case is no different. In this case, the defendant calmly made a denial about the crime she was arrested for before she was eventually sentenced. Let's take a seat at the Charleston County Court to see how it unfolded. This trial started with Indumbo denying the accusations that were meted against her in her involvement in the shooting and killing of Robert Patterson.
I did not pull that trigger.
The robbery happened at a Northside motel in 2018. She and her friend, Mike, were at the hotel planning a car theft with another couple, according to the police. The plan went south when Mike shot Robert Patterson to death.
He's standing over Robert for about 3-4 seconds, and that's when 2 shots went off. And Robert didn't move at all.
She said Mike also shot and injured Robert's girlfriend, and they fled in Robert's car.
I was in shock because somebody who I thought was a friend to me, I never thought that he would just mercilessly execute 2 people.
They were later captured and charged for capital murder. Mike pled guilty to a reduced charge of murder and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Indumbo was charged with aggravated robbery.
It is the order of the court that you be sentenced to 20 years confinement.
During the sentence, Indumbo's mother read an apology that brought Indumbo to tears.
"I'm sorry I failed you. Looking back now that I'm not really into grieving, I feel like I could have done more for you."
If you think all the previous cases are shocking, this next case is not only shocking but also weird, because in this case, the defendant is an actual judge, and her response to her sentencing was somewhat surprising, given that she also passed sentences for other past defendants. Let's head to Hamilton County to see how it unfolded. Hunter, a former judge in the Hamilton County juvenile court system, was convicted of unlawful interest in a public contract for helping her brother keep his job as a juvenile corrections officer. It's a 4th-degree felony. She lost her job and her law license and was sentenced to 6 months in jail. Her supporters felt the punishment was too extreme, in particular for someone who had never been in trouble before and who still had a positive impact in the community. Some also claimed the conviction was politically motivated. Through various appeals, Hunter was able to delay her sentencing for over 6 years. In this particular trial, her attorney decides to request a delay.
She's lost peace of mind, not knowing when that day was going to come and she'd have to go to jail. That's a lot for one person to have on her shoulders.
Judge Patrick Dinkelacke has heard the request and is ready to announce Hunter's sentence. But first, he has a message for those self-described registered voters who sent dozens of postcards to his home, asking him not to send Hunter to jail.
Attempt was to intimidate me in any way. That has flat out failed. Okay? I will never, ever, ever bow to that type of pressure, veiled threats, vicious comments, lies about me or anything else.
Then everyone in the crowded courtroom anxiously awaits Judge Dinkelacke's decision.
Number 1, you pay the cost of these proceedings. Number 2, you are to not violate any laws. And number 3, you are to do 6 months in the Hamilton County Justice Center. Credit 1 day. Mr. or Ms. Deputy can take her away.
Hunter's supporters were outraged. As this deputy attempts to take Hunter away, initially she seems to resist, but then, perhaps realizing that her time has run out, her body goes totally limp. While shouts of no justice are heard from the gallery, she's literally dragged out of the courtroom. As tempers flare in the courtroom, Hunter is put in a wheelchair and processed while her supporters exit the building and rally outside. Unlike how the previous cases ended in loud wailing, this case ended in a somber and quiet way. In this case, the defendant showed only remorse for her crime and couldn't say anything to explain why she did what she did. Let's take a seat at the Los Angeles Superior Court to see how it unfolded.
They walked in as I was crying, and I told them, they're dead. They're all dead.
Through tears, Mary addressed the court and never looked at Olivia Culbreth, the woman who 4 years before the trial killed her mother, father, sister, and grandmother.
I saw the window shattered with my grandmother's wheelchair in the back.
It was a horrific scene where Olivia Culbreth, who had been driving at 100 miles per hour in the wrong way, collided with the car Mary's family drove in.
I felt like my heart was ripped out of my chest and burned.
Both people in Olivia Culbreth's car also died. Culbreth, who is now confined to a wheelchair, was the only one who survived.
No words. No words can convey how my heart feels.
Alcohol is suspected to be the primary factor in the accident after Culbreth was observed by law enforcement as acting drunk both at the scene and in the hospital. However, her blood alcohol content has not been made public. She suffered a broken femur and a ruptured bladder, but is listed in stable condition. This driving accident occurred 11 days after she had given birth to a baby boy. When she was 16, she caused an accident where no one was hurt, and her driving license was suspended for almost 5 years. She had just gotten her license a month before this devastating accident happened. Olivia's mum described how Olivia's son reacted every time they went to visit her in prison.
He jumps up on the little shelf and tries to move the glass.
Olivia was sentenced to 30 years in prison and must serve 25 years before becoming eligible for parole. Her son will be 29 years old by then. Just like in the previous case, the defendant apologized for her offense before she was sentenced. Let's take a seat at Oakland County Court to see how it unfolded. Brianna apologizes for her action during the trial.
I would like to send my deepest apologies to his office. I never meant for none of this to happen.
Despite her apologies, Judge Hala Jarbo was having none of it.
The only thing that you were concerned about was yourself and getting out of that situation, as opposed to abiding by the law and following the officer's instructions. But more importantly, to get on the phone and contact someone and to lie about what was occurring.
Brianna Smart pleaded no contest to assaulting a police officer, fleeing and eluding, assault with a dangerous weapon, and driving without a valid license. Auburn Hills Police released dashcam video showing when Officer Martin Michalajczak tried to arrest Smart for driving on a suspended license. The two struggle, then Smart jumps into her car and puts it in reverse, her open door striking Michalajczak and slamming him into his car. She then drives away. Michalajczak recovered and returned to duty. Judge Jabu eventually delivered her judgment, which was quite lengthy, but not very severe.
Third degree, count 2, resisting and obstructing a police officer causing injury. Count 3, assault with a dangerous weapon. You're sentenced to 2 years probation, 365 days jail, 56 days credit. As it relates to count 4, driving with your license suspended, 93 days jail.
This brings us to the end of the video of dangerous black women reacting to life sentences. Click any of the cards displayed on your screen for more interesting videos like this one.